Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mysterious Worlds. I'm your host, Paul Rook, and so here I am. Apologies for not going out last week. I just had a really busy day at work, absolutely knackered. So I thought I'll have a week off. But this week we've got a really good guest joining us. He's an author, and he's written a book about um, UFOs based on his own experiences. So I'd like to introduce Colin Saunderson.
Good
Colin,
evening, Paul.
hiya, how are you?
Yeah, I'm fine, thank you. Yeah, Colin Saunders, by the way.
Colin
Saunders.
Saunders.
Yeah,
That's
there you go.
it. Nearly got it right. Yeah. So how have you been?
Pretty good, pretty good. Always keeping busy. There's been a lot of interest in the book. A lot of people contacting me for podcasts. I
Yeah.
always find them a bit nerve-wracking, to be honest, but I'm
Yeah.
getting better. The more podcasts I do, the better I'll become at it. Yeah.
Exactly. You'll be an old pro at it later. Yeah, absolutely. So, you mentioned your book already. How did that book come about?
Well, we had an experience with a UFO 24 years ago, and
Hmm.
it was a family experience. My wife, daughter, mother-in-law, we'd been out for a bar meal.
Yeah.
Um, so basically, I'll go through the sighting now, and then this is what's led up to writing the book. So basically, 31st of March 1999, we've been to a pub called the White Lion in Paleton in Warwickshire. We left there. My wife was driving in the Ford Fiesta. There was a second vehicle in the group which left a little bit after us. They were struggling to get the old lady into the Range Rover, so we pulled off in front through the country lanes. It's really dark in the countryside and remote where we'd been for the meal. And we turned on to the Foss Way, the old Foss Way, the Roman road.
Yeah.
Strangely, sorry, strangely enough, just before we turned on to the Foss Way, my daughter mentioned there had been talk of headless horsemen down the Foss. We all laughed and said, "Oh, we'll keep our eyes open for him." As soon as we turned the corner, there were some lights down in front of us, half a mile away, just hovering by the side of the road. And we all go, "What on earth's that?" There were no lights on the way up. It's too low for aeroplanes and too many lights for a helicopter. It was just incredible.
Yeah.
So we drove up to lights, all talking about them, all getting excited. And we drove more or less underneath. I'd say they were 100 feet away. Now, I based that on steering a friend of mine's canal boat. Got a canal boat that's 70 foot long.
Yeah.
So when I say 100 feet, I mean 100 feet. I could hit it with a cricket ball. But the strange thing was, there wasn't a craft there when we first drove underneath the lights. It was just the lights. And it was red with a bit of white mixed in it. It's the brightest lights I've ever seen in my life. Just absolutely fantastic. I've been to a few firework displays in my time, because I love that sort of thing. I've
Yeah.
never seen anything as bright as this, right next to us. But there was no craft at this point, just the lights. As I stared at the lights, I noticed the sky was starting to sort of ripple around the outside of the lights. And I'm thinking, there's an object there. It's not just lights on their own, because I just thought they were balls of light.
Yeah.
There was an object. And as I thought, there's an object there, it just decloaked straight away like that and became solid metallic triangular shaped craft. And then the rear end of the craft stayed where it was, and the nose rose up in the air like a horse, like a stallion rising up.
Yeah.
But it rose up so we could see the top surface of the craft. The bottom of the craft was facing away from us. We were looking at the rear end, and then the nose rose in the air. Now, it's true to say that the rear end stayed where it was. If I show you on this model I've got here, because it was so close to the ground, if it had tilted from the middle of the craft, it would have struck the ground. But
Yeah.
the rear end stayed where it was, and the nose came up in the air like so. And
Okay.
it looked like it was alive. It looked like it was organic, this craft, even though it was clearly manufactured. It
Yeah.
was the most amazing thing I have ever seen in my life.
But
And
that model that you've just showed us, is that what you saw?
it is, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
It's exactly what we saw, basically. Um, so my wife, who was driving the car, decided then to pull forward and reverse into a gateway, which
Yeah.
was more or less underneath where this triangle was hovering. The trouble was, as she drove forward, there was a hedge that blocked the view. And I thought to myself, if it's going to go, it's going to go now. So she reversed into the gateway. We jumped out of the car. Sure enough, it had gone. There were no
Hmm.
signs of any aircraft being there, no smell of any aviation fuel, anything along those lines. Now we looked around, and in the distance there was a craft disappearing, which you've got the same 4 red lights at the back of the craft. Now that was massive. That was like the size of a football pitch. I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And I said to the girls, I think that's the same craft, but it's grown in size. I mean, I knew nothing about UFOs. I've never been involved with the UFO world. So my first report that I gave to a gentleman called Omar Fowler, I put in the report there that I thought the small craft had changed to the large one. I thought it morphed into a big one because it was such a weird night, such a surreal experience.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing about UFOs whatsoever. It was only later on when I started doing research that I realised the large one was probably a mothership that the smaller one went back to, although we've never seen it actually leave. But it's such a strange subject. We could only guess at what took place that night. But yeah, I made a series of crafts over the models along the way.
Yeah.
I'll put the lights on this one to show you this one. The first one I made basically was this one, which is made out of plywood, and I bought some LEDs and a battery pack.
Yeah.
I printed this on CorelDRAW and stuck it onto the plywood and with down as a frame. I made this about 24 years ago, not long after the incident.
So is that the model of the smaller ship?
It is, yes. Yeah, we didn't see any detail really on the larger one going away. The football size one. This is the small one that was next to us that was like 100 feet away. But you see these beams, they're raised off the surface, and I couldn't quite produce that with this handmade craft. So a friend of mine, John Mills, came along. He's got a 3D printer, and he says, I want to make your model for you, which I thought was great. You can see one of them lit up behind me at the moment.
Yeah.
So this is the first ones that we made. This is a very small handheld craft. It's got the lines on top, which are on relief. They come up off the surface, the interlocking lines on the surface.
Yeah.
On this particular model.
Yeah, you can just make them out.
But it's not encoded. It's not 100% copy of what we saw that night, but it's along the way. Now, it cost John quite a bit of money to make this little model. So I said to him, if I sell these on eBay for you, could you make me a large model? If we sell enough, I don't want any money. I'll give all the money to you, and can you make me a big one? He agreed. So we started selling them. And he also made, you can see in the background, a flying saucer with lights going around the top of it. And he also made a cigar-shaped UFO. So we sold those, and eventually got enough together for him to make me this large model. I'll just switch the lights on this one. Now this is the more important model. Right, now, as you can see, as we came up to the rear of the craft, it was actually tilted at an angle to the earth. It wasn't parallel to the earth, it was tilted. I think over the years, I think possibly it was tilting towards us. So as we drove towards it, we could see more of the lights underneath. That's the only reason I could figure why it would be tilted. But the thing is, when it materialized and then rose in the air, like so, I don't know if you can see on the surface, this surface looked like liquid, looked like it was alive. So you can catch the light a bit better. Yeah. You can see it on there. So that looked like liquid flowing up and down the surface. But you see the beams that are interlocking? They were solid on top of the grey liquid, and they were absolutely solid. They weren't fluid, so it wasn't heat, haze, or electromagnetic effect. The actual rippling on the surface was the liquid going up and down the surface of the craft. And this is the most accurate. You can see a central white core of the craft, and the top and the bottom are rolled over like a hovercraft skin to join the central core. But there was no welding, no nuts and bolts, no rivets. I mean, it was just absolutely fantastic, the craft. Now, because these beams on the surface are raised up in 3D, and we never saw the underneath of it, but I was sent a drawing from Omar Fowler from a sighting in Belgium back in the 80s, which had these lines in relief on the bottom of the craft. So I thought, hey, that must be the same craft as we've seen.
Yeah, it's very similar, isn't it?
So I've used the sighting of the Belgium craft to make the bottom of this to coincide with the top and the rear that we saw. But I mean, that could have been just flat black for all we know underneath, because we never did actually see the underneath of it, because the way it tilted up, we just got to see the top surface of the craft. So that sort of got me involved in the UFO world, and I started researching on the internet, finding about UFOs. I mean, if I was going to make it up, I would have said it was a flying saucer. I didn't realise triangles were so popular until I got onto Google and started searching, and it just seems a lot of triangular sightings all around the world at the moment. So over the years, I went to a few UFO conferences, did a few presentations. I even went to a conference over in America at Laughlin, near Nevada, Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then more recently, once John had built me the larger model, I decided to go to a conference in Hull, the Outer Limits magazine conference.
Yeah.
I did a presentation there, which was really well received, and I met a real nice couple of gentlemen, the Kinsella twins, Ronnie and Philip. Yeah. And it was Philip who suggested I write a book. Well, I sort of toyed with the idea, and I thought I'd retire before I wrote a book. But then I thought, well, why not? Why not do it now? Over the last 24 years, I've collected a lot of information from people of sightings locally, of sightings that people had, primarily triangles, because that's what I was interested in. So I wanted to write a book about my own experience and some of the strange things that happened along the way, which we haven't touched on yet. But to get a book, to get a reasonable sized book, I had to start introducing other people's sightings and start asking in social media, people had seen triangles and could they give me descriptions of what they'd seen, etc. And also got a lot of information from John Hanson on triangular craft with police officers as well, and basically pulled it all together into one book and got the infamous Philip Mantle to produce a book, and here we are today trying to publicise the book as much as we can on these podcasts. But primarily, I wrote the book to talk about my experience rather than try and make any money out of it. I've never made any money out of this in the last 24 years. So the book is really to talk about my experience and the things that have happened along the way.
Yeah. But whereabouts can people get your book?
It's on Amazon. It's for sale now on Amazon UK. So you can pop along there and buy it. I think it's about £11.50, something along those lines.
What's it called?
It's called Triangular UFOs of the United Kingdom.
Cool.
I've got a copy which we'll perhaps read a few lines from as we go along, but there's the cover basically. That's the underneath of the model.
Yeah.
That's computer graphics that a friend of mine in Canada did for me. He's done some fantastic illustrations, and they appear in the book as well.
Yeah. Cool. So these other people that you got the stories from, whereabouts in the UK are they from? Is it centralised or?
No, they're all over the UK. Scotland, Wales, England. I'm not sure if I've got any in there from Ireland. I don't think so. Although there has been triangular activity in Ireland.
Yeah.
There's a section on local sightings. Now I live in Hinckley. I live in Barwell now, which is a village just outside Hinckley in Leicestershire. So I've got a lot of sightings in there from the Hinckley area, from Hinckley people.
Just down the road from me.
Yes. We, you're in Nottingham, is it?
Yeah, it's just a little town outside Hinckley, actually.
Is it? All right. Whereabouts are you?
Between Hinckley and Tamworth.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so, little market town
there. Small world, yeah.
Yeah, it is a bit. Okay, have you got many sightings from around here?
From Tamworth area?
Yeah.
There are a few in there, yes. There's quite a detailed sighting actually in there from Tamworth area. I've forgotten his name at the moment. It's a double-barreled name, but I'd have to search through the book to find it. There is over 130 different sightings in the book.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of information in there.
Brilliant. Oh, that's fantastic. So what have you uncovered in your research? Do you think they're aliens, or are you more on the fence, or
no? For the first 20 years of the experience, I've generally talked about the nuts and bolts of what we've seen, which is what I've just talked about now. However, there was a bit of high strangeness for me during the encounter.
Yeah.
And then I started to have some other experiences afterwards. Now, this all sounds very strange because I am a draftsman by trade. I've worked in the aircraft industry. I'm an engineer, a nuts and bolts man. And for this to start happening to me was quite mind blowing, to be honest. So basically, what happened on the night when the craft tilted up, as the nose rose in the air like this,
Yeah.
all of a sudden, I could see these interlocking lines on the surface close up. It was like somebody got some binoculars in front of my eyes.
Yeah.
I could see these right up close like this, about that sort of scale. And I could see the interlocking of the bars. Then there was a second view, which was the nose, and the nose was round. It was just beautiful, spherical. It was the most amazing piece of engineering I've seen. And then there was a side view, which showed the central white core and the top and bottom rolled over to join the central white core. Now, without the close views, I wouldn't have been able to see that central core. So I wouldn't have seen it from the aspect ratio of where we were looking at the craft tilting up, because we were looking at tilting this way.
Yeah.
So when I got back and I was thinking about these three close-up views, and as I didn't really know much about it, and I was only getting into the subject, I decided I'd had out-of-body experience and I'd got close to the craft. And that's all I could think of, but I couldn't understand why there were three separate views. You know, from the nose to the side view, why didn't I see it roll like that? So I started doing a bit of research on out-of-body experiences and see if I could do it again, but I never managed to get around to doing it again.
Yeah.
But the weird thing was I started to have other experiences after the UFO event. And I had none prior to the UFO event. No paranormal experiences that I can remember in my whole life.
Yeah.
I was starting to have other weird things happen. Like some of them were lights in the sky, very close at times. Splats on the head, whip cracks in the car, balls of light in the cloud over the park. But one of the scariest ones was something invisible at the river. Like, say it'd be, I don't know, a year, maybe less than a year after the event. I'm fishing away and I can hear some footsteps coming across the field. So I climb up out of the riverbank. Noise continues, but there's nobody there. But these footsteps, there's 4 footsteps, sounds like 2 people, and they're quite heavy, walks right in front of me. Now, from left to right, probably 6 foot away, and I'm thinking, it's a big cat. And I got really panicky, so I'm right out in the countryside. So I got a spike out of my rod holder that I use for my umbrella. And I was going to use that to protect myself if I could against this, what I thought was going to be a cat.
Yeah.
It just disappeared in a way, like, and like I say, I'm an engineer, so like I'm thinking, what's happening here? It's only after the event that I realised it wasn't actually here, that it was some sort of a paranormal happening. One of these space-time contingencies or something along those lines, that whatever I was listening to wasn't here.
Yeah.
I stood there, this is 10 o'clock in the morning, in my waders, and my bait apron on, and I'm thinking, this has only started since the UFO sighting. It's obviously got to be connected. So that was the day I decided there and then, to answer your question in a roundabout way, I believe the dimensional rather than extraterrestrial. If that craft we saw that night was simply extraterrestrial, once it had left, I would not be having any other experiences.
Well,
because these other experiences, it's got to be connected.
Absolutely. You saying about the basically the invisible entity, whatever you want to call it, person. There's a documentary called Missing 411: The Hunters. I don't know if you've heard of it. That basically in the US they're talking about hunters that would go missing mysteriously and then be found 300 miles away, naked, dead somewhere, and various other little bits and pieces like that. And I think the same sort of thing happened to children as well. But there's one particular story in there where a hunter was up in the trees, and unbeknownst to them, a little bit earlier in the day, there was a UFO sighting in the same town over a football pitch. And as she was up in this high thing, she claimed that she saw you know, like in the Predator movies, and it's cloaked in, and you get that little shimmer. She claims that she see that, and there's a good few other stories like that. So that might be worth looking into.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, when our craft materialised, before it became solid, it was shimmering like the Predator film, along those lines. Yeah. So what I couldn't understand about all of this was why I was the only one having these extra experiences. My wife, my daughter, and my mother-in-law were
Yeah.
not having the experiences. So I stood there at the riverbank and thought, well, obviously the UFO has done something to my brain that's allowing these other things to come in now. And is that because of the close viewing, the out
Yeah.
of body experience? So, like I say, I started going to UFO conferences, and I went to. I used to go to Leeds. The conferences were great. They were run by Graham Birdsall and Russell Callahan from the old UFO magazine.
Yeah.
There's great speakers there over the years. Well, I met quite a few interesting, famous UFO people, Stanton Friedman, etc., Dr. Roger Lear. Importantly, I met Bud Hopkins. I had a quick chat with the late Bud Hopkins. I told him about the close viewing when we was next to the triangle, and that I thought I'd had an out-of-body experience. Now, Bud said to me, no, he says, you've not had an out-of-body experience. He says, those images were placed in your mind while they was on board the craft by the aliens. Like, before we got a chance to expand on that, this woman butted in and Bob started talking to her, and that was the end of my 30 seconds, if you like.
Yeah.
So I went away and I thought about it, but I didn't really take it on board. Then I started listening to a lot of Dr. David Jacobs' work on alien abduction. He's interviewed over 1,000 people, or been involved with over 1,000 cases of alien abduction.
Yeah.
What keeps coming up time and time again is telepathy. You hear this a lot with aliens.
Yeah.
I'd assume that telepathy was words in your mind going backwards and forwards, like having a conversation. But he does talk about people sometimes having images placed in their minds rather than words as a way of communicating. Then all of a sudden, out of the blue, and I'll put it in the book, this email I got from America, this guy said his opening shot was, just like you, I had 3 images placed in my mind by the aliens on board the craft. He had a close encounter again with a triangle, and he had 3 images, close-up images. He says one was pipe work on the outside, the other one he thinks was some lights on the outside, and the third one he thought was possibly actually inside the craft itself.
Okay.
And that when he said that in his email, the penny dropped. I thought, my God, you're right. Bud Hopkins was right all along. I've not had an out-of-body experience. It was, in fact, images placed in my mind from, I say those on board the craft, but I also say the craft looked like it was alive, like it was organic. I mean, is there a possibility the craft itself did that? Is the craft some sort of really advanced AI technology, or is it an actual living creature, even though it's been manufactured as such? All of this is a science that we don't understand, but I believe that it is a science, what's taking place, but it's way advanced of what we understand, what we know. So when we got to writing the book, I decided to start asking people who were writing in if they'd had any other experiences, paranormal experiences. Now, strangely enough, more people were saying yes than were saying no. So in the end, I ended up with a whole section in the book about UFOs and the paranormal. They do go hand in hand. And there's
absolutely. There's countless stories of witnessing UFOs or UAPs or whatever they want to call them now, and paranormal activity that follows that, even down to cryptozoology, because UFOs and the Sasquatch, the Yeti, and all that sort of stuff sort of goes hand in hand as well. That's another.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, yes, I do. Yeah. So if we all take that on board, surely that means it's dimensional, not extraterrestrial. If it's just extraterrestrial, it would just come down, disappear, and then you would have nothing else happen. But the fact that it's dimensional and the ghosts and other weird things seem to exist between these dimensions, I think it's all connected. I'm 100% certain it's all connected.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, when they cross from one dimension to another, they sort of break it a bit, so other dimensions bleed through as well.
Yes, yeah, that's interesting, because the next day after the sighting, I went back down and retraced my route. When I turned onto the Foss Way from the country lane, I failed to see how we could have seen the UFO from that distance. I mean, there were trees in the way and stuff like that, but it was we could clearly see it once we turned the corner. The only other way it could have been if it was higher and actually came down towards it. I don't think that was the case. It seemed to be stationary all the time. Towards it. Now, a week or so later,
I think you've broken up there. Maybe the aliens don't want you to talk about it.
You still there?
Yeah, there you are. I was just saying, maybe the aliens didn't want you to talk about
Yeah,
it.
something happened there. Always a possibility of or somebody's hacking into my computer trying to shut me up. That's been a thing about this UFO stuff. It's so weird, but I'm quite happy talking about it. I'm 64. I'm 65 this year.
Yeah.
I'm quite happy to say what happened. I've put it in the book. You know, people can read what took place that night and the things that have happened since then as well.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, before you broke up, you was just saying that you drove up to the field and then you couldn't see how you would see that.
That's right. Yeah, and in case you didn't hear it, my wife went to pick a friend of ours up from the airport, and on the way back, she came that way specifically to show where we'd seen for her, just the lights, but for us, the craft. And when she got home, she said she fails to see how we managed to see it from where we turned the corner.
Yeah.
She said she thought the scenery had changed. Now, which is odd because I'd thought the same. So I was saying, getting back to what you said earlier, perhaps we got caught up in another dimension slightly.
Yeah.
I have heard of that happening before, actually. A taxi driver who had an encounter with a UFO, and he knew the roads ever so well as a taxi driver.
Yeah.
When he went back the next day, he couldn't find those roads that led to where he'd seen the UFO. It was like they didn't exist. It was like he'd been in another dimension for a short time.
I mean, there's also stories of, okay, it's not UFO related. It's more time travel, where people have driven through little villages and they've seen. I think one of them was they were doing like a flower in bloom type of thing in the village, and then when they went back the next day to see the flowers and that stuff, they found the village, but it was completely different. There was no flowers to be seen. So they believe that they drifted through a time fracture.
Yeah,
and it's that sort of thing, but dimensional, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I've got a report from local in Hinckley. A friend of mine, he left Nuneaton on his motorbike. I think it's about 1979. To drive back to Hinckley, which should only take him about 20 minutes. But as he came up Coventry Road towards Transco, which is the gas central hub for the UK, as he got closer, he said he could see some balls of light flying along with him on his motorbike to the side. I think he said there was a red one and a white one, which he thought was very peculiar. But then as he got to Transco itself, his motorbike stopped working. And he just stood astride his motorbike, and he said this triangle came over Transco, and he said it was 1.5 times the size of a football pitch, lights in the corner, and a glass dome underneath towards the rear end, but he couldn't see any entities within the glass dome. But he said it glided slowly overhead, massive, this triangle, and out towards the town centre. Nobody else seen it. I think there were 1 or 2 reports in the newspaper, but nobody's seen it quite the same as he did.
Yeah.
So he kicked his motorbike up. It started working okay. So he rode home, and looked at his bedside clock, and he'd lost 1.5 hours. So he woke his parents up to check the time, told them what had happened, and sure enough, 1.5 hours of time just disappeared on that journey as the triangle came over him. but he's got no recollection of anything happening or being taken or whatever.
Mm.
And there's quite a few in the book where people talk about time, and I am starting to wonder whether time somehow is involved in these close encounters. I'm not saying they're time travelers, they might be, but time just sometimes seems to slip away with people, and I don't think they've always been and then brought back again.
I think, you know, the closer to the speed of light that they travel, if these crafts can reach those speeds, they do effectively travel in time forward rather than backwards. Um, but yeah, you're right. There are a lot of stories as well of people losing time, especially in the US. You know, you see it all the time. You know, it's like they're driving
Yeah,
along these country roads, trees each side of the road, driving down the middle, and then their engine stops, and then they lose hour and a half, 2 hours of time.
that's
Um,
right. I know. I know our sighting was just absolutely amazing, and then I tell people about it, and I sort of hope they believe me. I think most people do. There's not many people who go against it. But one thing I've learned is that if I expect people to accept my story, then I should be accepting their stories. And some of the things that
mm,
people have told me over the years is just incredible. Like not
yeah,
always to do with the UFOs, but the paranormal. Like, and once you start talking to people, and people know that you're involved in it, people start coming up with all sorts of stories. People that I wouldn't have thought would have anything to say on the subject will suddenly say, "Oh, I seen a ghost so and so many
yeah.
years ago." Or I seen one of the ones I always remember is a Roman chariot being drawn by a horse with a Roman soldier at the back of it coming
Yeah.
out the M69 when they were building the M69 motorway through Binkley over
Okay.
to Stanton Way. I've asked the guy on several occasions over the years, and he always tells me the same story. He said he just sort of come out of the workings of the motorway, and there it was. He said he could see it, full solid horse.
Doesn't Watling Street go all the way down there?
That's right. Yeah. Now where we saw our
That,
sighting,
that's a Roman road.
that's right. We were on the Foss Way, which is a Roman road, and just a couple of miles from where we had the sighting is the Watling Street, and they
Yeah.
cross at a point called High Cross. And there's been quite a lot of UFO activity around that High Cross area. I've got an
Mm.
account in the book by a guy called Mal Orton. He lives in Sharnford. He was going to work 3 a.m. in the morning as a lorry driver. So he's driving to work in his car, comes out of Sharnford in the countryside, and there's near Bumblebee Lane, there's a triangle. He says it's the size of a football pitch, and it's just at like hedge height. It's just off the ground by the side of the road over this field. He stopped
Mm.
his car, got out, had a look at it. He said it was massive, but it wasn't moving a millimetre. It was just hanging there like a picture in the sky. And he said it got the beams on the surface and the lights underneath. He said you could see them, but they were reversed to our lights. We had white in the middle, red in the corners. You had white in the corners, red in the middle. So he got a bit nervous about that and decided like you best leave the area. Got back in his car and drove off to work and kept watching it in his rear view mirror as he drove away. And one of the amazing things about that sighting is it's about 6 miles as a crow flies from our sighting, and just 2 weeks afterwards, or 2
Yeah,
weeks,
that is interesting.
real close to the date that we seen ours back in March 1999. I think it was two weeks prior to our sighting.
Yeah.
So, and
But
I believe there's other sightings around that area. Whether the Watling Street and the Foss Way have got any influence on that, because I know some people are into ley lines. They seem to think that UFOs might follow ley lines, so there may be something in that. I don't know.
yeah, I'd say, I mean, most sightings in particularly the US, because that's where I've heard a lot of stories from. Um, the UFOs tend to follow the military installations where they have nuclear weapons. And I
Yes,
know
yes, yes, definitely.
Rendlesham Forest as well was a UFO hotspot. Um, and apparently a UFO was sighted there. And that was a US base in
Yeah,
Rendlesham
I think
area.
that was back in the 80s, was it? 1980,
Yeah,
I think. 1980 when the UFOs came down, and I believe they interfered with the nuclear weapons, either turned them off or reprogrammed them to
yeah,
different.
I think they were turning them off, weren't they? I think.
Yeah, there's been a lot written about Rendlesham Forest. I've not touched that on in the book because I think that's been flogged to death in the past by a lot of other authors.
Yeah, yeah. I must
Yeah, I don't
admit,
really class
I have
myself.
been there.
I don't really class myself as an author. I just a bloke who had a strange experience and written a book. If you know what I
Yeah.
mean.
Although Rendlesham is quite an eerie place. I mean, when we went there, we actually walked around looking for this UFO place because they've got a little statue thing at the sighting clearing. And at the time, I was on crutches because I had a really bad back. And by the time I walked all the way around, we didn't find it, but I found the car. Got back to the car. You could wring the t-shirt out with all the sweat and everything because it was a really hot day as well. So I said, I'm waiting in the car while the others went off to look for this UFO clearing. And as I was sitting there, some strange bloke pulled up in his car, and he was just waiting, just just waiting around. When my friends got back, they got talking to him, and apparently he was someone that worked at the US base, and he was supposed to meet a reporter there that didn't show up, and he claimed that he saw this strange looking creature running in and out of all the cars when they were parked at the base. And he
Wow.
reckons it was almost like a golem type monkey thing. It was really weird.
Yeah, pretty scary, I would
We
say.
did want him to come onto the show, and we said, we'd hide your identity and all that. And he agreed, but then he disappeared. Never heard of again.
Very odd, isn't it? Yeah, I've seen
Yeah.
photos that people have taken in Rendlesham Forest, and there's all sorts of strange anomalies showing up. It's a bit like the Skinwalker Ranch in America.
Yeah.
It used to be a hot spot, doesn't it, Rendlesham?
Well, yeah. Again, I've seen because I've not ever actually been there, and I doubt I'll ever go there. I've seen the documentaries on the telly, and they are really weird. It's almost like there's clouds of radiation that just go through the whole area. They're picking up energy from the sky and energy from the floor, and yeah, that is
Yeah.
a weird place.
There's some strange things happening in the world, isn't there? Once you
Yeah,
get involved in this subject and you start looking around, I
that's
mean, look
it.
at the fakes that are on the internet. There's some proper stuff there, and it's
Mm.
weird what's happening.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
not,
another documentary I like watching is Expedition Bigfoot,
uh,
and going back to the whole cloaking alien or whatever it was. Um, they were toying with the idea that there's a legend going around that they can actually turn themselves invisible. That's why we can't see them. And in one of the programs, they shone a light onto a white cliff, and then you see this shadow walking past, but you don't actually see what causes that shadow.
oh, yeah.
That is really weird.
Yeah, yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's a TV program, so you got to take that sort of stuff with a pinch of salt. Um, you
You
know,
have. I
do
think
generally
we've had
happen.
some very strange things happening in the world. Very strange.
There is absolutely. So, is there any other than the sighting that you've had? Is there any other UFO sighting that's really piqued your interest that you really want to look into further?
There's some exciting stuff in the book. I can read you a couple of samples, if you like, of ones that I find particularly exciting.
Yep.
It's also a good plug for the book,
Yeah,
everybody.
go for it. Plug the book as much as you want.
Yeah, well, I don't intend writing another one. I must admit, it took me 24 years to get round to writing this one.
Yeah.
Right, this is a report from a guy called Charles B. from December 2011. So he'd seen a light in the sky, and he was discussing it with his daughter. And we decided to look for the light and try to get closer. We saw it one night moving over the Moden area of the town. Is that okay?
Yeah.
My ex-partner tried to say it was Venus, but Venus was also clearly visible, and the object was also clearly visible. My ex's daughter, who was 7 at the time, became hysterical and said it was aliens. We pursued the object, which was very bad, but as we followed slowly in the car into North Yorkshire, it seemed to be getting lower. We both reasoned it was maybe a helicopter, but there was no strobes and no noise. Somewhere between Cleesby and Manfield, we lost sight of it as it got too low. We looked for the object, but decided to give up and turn back home. As we drove back along the A67, I said, let's look down by the river at Low Coniscliffe. With hindsight, I think they told me it was there. After driving down the track to the river, it was probably about 300 feet above ground level. It was huge, at least 1,000 feet across. The lights at the apices were dim yellow-orange, and there was a dimmer orange light in the body towards the back. I got out of the car and stood staring at the triangle. There was total silence. I could no longer even hear the traffic from the nearby A1M motorway. The body was black and it blocked out the stars, but I could see stars around it and also a nearby farmhouse on the hill south of the river. It also seemed to block out the breeze. I don't know whether I got closer to it or it to me, but I seemed right underneath it. I could see black channels etched in the underside of it, which you have now made me think are a docking mechanism. I can't explain how, I've never told anybody until now, but it seemed to be just a few feet above me. It seemed to be made of slate or graphite material, very dark grey and a smooth matte texture. I could feel the presence in my whole body and a dental implant was vibrating in my mouth. I could see the channels covered the underside of the craft. They are probably 6 feet across and of a similar depth. I raised my hand and touched part of the craft's body between the channels. I was terrified. I even thought it could harm me, but I did it anyway. I pushed my fingers over it and then put my entire palm on it. It felt like a hard kitchen worktop with a matte finish, but it was not cold. The next thing I remember is my daughter shouting to me to come back to the car. She hadn't wanted to get out. So that's a pretty amazing close encounter, I would say. A 1,000-foot triangle that comes down low enough that you're able to touch your hand underneath. It also shows the accuracy of these things. You can guide a 1,000-foot triangle down on top of somebody without actually damaging or getting so close. It's just beggars belief. But I believe all of the sightings in the book are genuine. I've got no problem with them.
Yeah. So we got a question in the chat room from Michael Cameron. He said, have you encountered the infamous MIB, Men in Black or Woman in Black, after seeing your triangular craft?
No, not at all. No, never. Unfortunately, I've had no contact from anybody in authority that I'm aware of. I know in the book there's one or two people who have visits from Men in Black, but for me personally, no, nothing at all.
Yeah.
Good question, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean that's another phenomenon that's reported quite a lot.
Yeah, there's a local lady who worked in Enderby at a place that was called Carlton Hayes, which was for mentally unwell people. She'd had a triangle experience, and she's had quite a lot of experiences since then as well, actually, funnily enough.
Yeah.
And I think she put it in the Hinkley Times. And then she was at work at Carlton Hayes, and she had a visit. They said, there's somebody in reception wants to see you. And there were two men, and she said they were in black suits and they even wore bowler hats.
Yeah.
And they were talking to her about what she'd seen and told her not to tell anybody. And she said she wouldn't, but she said it was all too late because she'd spoken to the newspaper anyway. So
Yeah.
in there, but yeah, I've put her write up in the book about the Men in Black. So they do exist. They do turn up now and again.
Yeah, I mean, I find that interesting as well because they as you said, they're always dressed in the black suits, and they wear the bowler hats. There's even reports of them, although they've got faces, they're sometimes distorted.
Yeah.
In some way, so it doesn't look like they're actually human.
Yeah, it reminds me of Tintin.
Yeah, it is very interesting. Secret organisation, MIB. Yeah, that'd be an interesting one.
I'll read you another short passage from the book. I find this one there, it's really interesting. This is from a lady called Lindsay Turner who got in touch with me. Again, I've got no reason to believe this is not true. She was excited when she was telling me over the phone about what took place. She told me on 2 separate occasions about this. So I had to write it out for her and check that I got it all correct. So this is what she says, basically. My friend was 3 years older than me, and we were unemployed at the time. We decided to go and visit Dad's property, a 10 to 15 minutes walk away, and we arrived at 8 p.m. The house had a football pitch just beyond the back garden, with wild space surrounding it. The weather had been dry all day. When we came to leave late that night, we glanced over to the football pitch via an entrance. We both spotted in the mist a triangular-shaped pyramid, so we decided to go and investigate. The pyramid object was the size of a council house and not quite on the ground, but hovering just above the ground by about a foot or two. The pyramid looked to be made of glass and was transparent. I could see swirls of coloured gas inside, yellow, blue, green, in fact like a rainbow. As they approached the pyramid, it backed away from them, but when they backed away, the pyramid returned to its original position. And this is the bit that really got me excited. She says the craft then became solid. In fact, Lindsay described it as being metallic with Egyptian hieroglyphs on all the sides. One of these hieroglyphs was a man with a bird's head carrying a long spear. Lindsay and her friend became nervous and decided to go home, where they believe they lost between half to 3/4 of an hour in time. Lindsay's friend plucked up courage and went back to the football pitch, but the pyramid and the mist had now gone. I asked Lindsay if she'd had any other paranormal experience, and she replied yes. And I've put those in the book as well, that she's had some experience of ghosts when she was younger.
Yeah.
I found that really exciting, the fact that there's a triangular-shaped craft there with Egyptian hieroglyphs on the side. This is tying up ancient history to UFOs and technology. It's just, I find that absolutely mind-blowing.
I mean, there are a lot of conspiracy theories that associate ancient civilizations with the UFOs, more so the Egyptians, because I mean there is a theory that the Great Pyramids are landing platforms for these UFOs.
That's right. Yeah, I've never really tied the two together until. Well, I say that, on the night of the encounter, when the craft first lifted in the air, before I got the close viewing, when it first came solid and rose up, I knew straight away it was not one of ours. And the three thoughts came straight into my head. The first one was, my God, aliens exist. The second one was, abductions must take place. And the third one was, this explains things from history that we don't understand. And that would include things like the pyramids,
Yeah.
Because I've got the feeling that this craft and the technology had been around for a long, long time. I don't think it had just arrived like in the last 20 or 30 years or since the Second World War. I think they've been here for a long, long time. And the Egyptian hieroglyphs on the side of the craft sort of ties that together, basically, for me.
Yeah. No, that does. It is really interesting, especially when it goes back to the ancient civilizations. Because some of the, maybe not technology, but when they have pyramids aimed at the sun and it catches it at certain times, and like the winter solstice and stuff like that, I think it's absolutely amazing how they've all worked that out.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm sure that we're not being told everything that's gone on in history. I think things are being hidden from us, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Going on.
I think the government's worried that it's going to cause too much havoc with people, and they're all going to be running around the streets going, "Oh, the aliens are coming! Help!"
Yeah, that's one side. Maybe there's more to it that as well. Maybe I've thought about it. If there is life after death, for instance, and the aliens know that, then if you knew that as a human being, you'd be less worried about the way you live your life here. You might become a bit more reckless, knowing that you're going to carry on when you're dead.
Yeah.
I don't know if there is life after death. I mean, when I had the out-of-body experience, I was quite happy with that, because I thought that meant you could live without your body, and I was starting to think you do live without your body. But then when Bud Hopkins busted my bubble and said it was alien images placed in the mind, telepathy, then the out-of-body thing sort of just fizzled away then. So we're back to wondering whether there is life after death. I don't know. We'll find out in a few years, unfortunately. So let me read you another section from the book.
Yep, okay.
This is from a guy who now lives in New Zealand. Now, this experience is quite similar to mine, because he gets some close-up views that just appear.
Yeah.
when he's standing next to a craft. Basically, I think they'd been out having a band practice and they'd seen some lights in the sky and a ball of light, and they decided they're going to follow it in the car. So basically, I'll pick the story up here and give you a quick rundown on what he says. We stopped and got out at the bridge to study the sky, looking for the object. Parked up in the lay-by was a Volkswagen camper van, the sort with a concertina roof. There was a light on inside, and I wanted to go and see if they had seen the object. Dave did not want to go. I walked down a very slight incline towards the cul-de-sac and turned to see Dave was saying, "No, don't," again and again, pleading with me not to go closer. "Don't do it, Rob." I turned and the camper van was not there. Instead, there was a gunmetal coloured wedge-shaped craft, very much like the side view of an F-117 Nighthawk stealth fighter. It is the best description. It was angular, sharp, pointy, defined. It was more of a wedge, but the angles and the surfaces reminded me. They were not smooth, they were flat. The image lasted 1 second, and I was instantly on the other side of it, facing what appeared to be its nose. It was remarkably close, maybe a foot away, and it appeared to be alive but artificial, same as I was saying earlier.
Yeah.
The nose, whilst rounded and almost like a glove puppet shape, and I had the sense that it was sniffing me. Either side of it, the visible sloping away parts either side of the nose had the appearance of being like the cow catcher on an old US steam train. I think that could be like the beams on the surface, the same as we had on our craft.
Yeah.
They had a pattern to them. It was like a maze, but with segments in it, like expensive chocolate, like a cattle branding iron might appear, or embossed writing paper. I recalled a red element to the nose, but at this point I was unaware of any surrounds at all. I'm being sniffed by the nose of a hovering craft. The nose is gone, and I'm in front of a panel. So he's getting these different views, the same that I did.
Yeah.
I'm in front of a panel with that embossed appearance on the side of something that is now looking like the base of a pyramid. As I reach out my hand, I hear Dave saying, "Rob, no, no." My hand goes into the pattern, which now has a liquid texture, like immersing your hand into a bowl of paint. There is an orange lightning flash, and there's a fizz boom, and like the turning off an old TV on back and the bridge with Dave. And I say, "Wow, that was really nice." We look up and see 3 white lights like flying stars flying away from us in the shape of a triangle. So that is such a strange story. He got in touch with me because he'd heard about my close viewing on the triangle on the night, the old binocular trick. He's obviously had a similar experience with the wedge-shaped craft that was parked up in a lay-by.
Yeah, it's
going through a Volkswagen camper van and turned into a UFO, which is and he immersed his hand
of all the van, of all the cars it could have transformed into. That'd be a camper van. But no, it's very, very reminiscent of your one as well, wasn't it?
Yes,
which is type thing.
I was excited when I got that from him. Yeah.
Have you got many sightings of this? What appears to be the same craft that you saw?
Sorry.
Have you had many sightings of the UFO that you saw?
Very similar, but to be honest, we've got 130 different sightings in the book.
Yeah.
And no two are exactly the same. Can be very similar.
Yeah.
But everything seems to be slightly different, either the size, slightly different shape, slightly different colour, the amount of lights, etc. But yes, obviously the Belgium sighting looks like it was the same craft that we saw. I've been through all of the because I've got much time left now. I'll just run through these actually because listeners might find this interesting. I've gone through the 130 different sightings and tried to find common factors or non-common factors, if you like, of interest. So, for instance, I would have said that most triangles that you hear about, and the majority are dark grey or black in colour. But throughout the book, we've also got orange, silver, gold, white, blue, and dark brown, and green as well. That's the colour of the craft itself, not the lights. That's the craft. So they're different coloured triangles. And as far as the lights are concerned, normally they're red and white, but we've also got green, blue, yellow, orange, bronze, purple, and a pinkish colour. Also often described with a white beam coming down from the centre of the craft. You see that a few times in the book as well.
Yeah.
And Noise. We heard no noise on the night of our craft, but the engine was still running the car. The engine didn't stop. So over the sound of the Fiesta engine, we couldn't hear any noise whatsoever. However, other people who have been close and outdoors to these craft do report like a dull hum, like a transformer, a low humming sound, buzzing, droning. Somebody said it sounded like the sucking of a vacuum cleaner. That's a strange one. The sizes vary from small to football pitch size. And the description, often you'll get fridge pipes running along them and girders, like on the top of my craft.
Okay, yeah.
Some pressure as well. Quite a few people describe pressure when they're close to them. Like the guy, I read the passage where his tooth is vibrating.
Yeah.
People feel pressure when they're close to these craft. Cloaking comes into it quite a bit. There's a few people talk about that. We had one guy locally who had a triangle come over which was half cloaked. He said the cloaking mechanism wasn't working very well. He could see half the triangle and half of it was invisible.
Yeah.
Quite an amazing sight. Other people report it as shimmering like tin foil, rippling, black tar effect. Missing time comes up in there a few times as well. And people are saying it looks alive but artificial. And the movement. When our craft tilted up, it was like a submarine underwater. The way it flowed, it was incredible. Once I got on the internet, I started looking at different sightings. When people talked about the craft floating away, describing it in that manner, I knew they were talking about the same, that they were talking about the right sort of craft, because that is the way they move. And it's described by people as being fluid or gliding, floating, like it's underwater. And sometimes it's been seen flying blunt end first as well, which is unusual. You'd think it would always be pointed end first if it was aerodynamics. But flying blunt end first gives the impression it's probably more, the shape's more for stability than it is for aerodynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, there is a theory that they form a bubble around the craft that makes them anti-gravity.
No, that's funny you should say that, because there's quite a few reports where people are talking about a round ball of light that suddenly turns into a triangle. Now you see that several times. Maybe that is the energy field they're using to travel in that you can actually see sometimes.
Yeah.
But yeah, that does come up quite a bit actually, funnily enough.
That is interesting. Yeah.
It's
So
also,
when something's in anti-gravity, it doesn't matter what shape is, because it will just drift in whatever direction it's pushed in.
yes, yeah. I did see a short video on quantum levitation where if you get a piece of metal and you freeze it down to 0 degrees Kelvin, it turns into a superconductor, and then you can get it to hover on a magnetic field without it moving a little bit at all. And you see all vapor coming off the piece of metal. Now, when our craft materialized, when it finally materialized and tilted up, these bottom wingtips here, little fluffy white clouds, vaporization appeared on those when the craft decloaked.
Okay.
It tilted up. Now, I've got a theory from that video that this liquid on the surface that you can see, perhaps this is something like liquid nitrogen trapped in a transparent skin. These beams on the surface could protrude down inside the liquid. That would mean all of these beams on the surface are superconductors. They're all down to 0 degrees Kelvin, and the bottom as well.
Yeah.
And that would then produce quantum levitation, and the craft would be able to hover by using the Earth's magnetic field against its own field that it's created because of all the superconductors that are surrounding the craft itself. And I think when people talk about refrigerator pipes on the back of craft, I think they're carrying the liquid themselves to create superconductors, whereas this one's got beams going into the liquid rather than tubes full of liquid.
Yeah, that's quite a theory.
It's only a guess. None of us know.
No, that's it. You know, it's just one of those things. You just put it out there, and I'm sure one day someone will pick it up and go, actually, I'll test that theory. Let's go.
Well, I'm sure if me as a layman has come to that idea, I'm sure the military have been messing around and trying these things themselves, to be honest.
Yeah, they've probably got their own UFOs flying around.
I don't know if there's such a thing as a TR-3B. Everybody talks about it, but I've seen no evidence of it. But it wouldn't surprise me they are trying to work on some of the alien technology.
Well, that's it. I mean, the Germans were doing it during the war, weren't they?
People know these things exist. The military must know what's going on.
Absolutely. Anyway, yeah, we've come to the end of the show. It's gone really quick.
Yeah, it does want to start with rabbiting, I'm afraid.
No, it's good. So quickly, do you want to plug your book again?
Yeah, it's available on Amazon, hardback. You can buy a hardback copy, or you can buy it paperback. There's also an audio book as well available. If anybody wants to download and listen to it. It's available on Amazon right now. And I hope everybody enjoys it. There's 130 genuine close encounter reports in that book. There's a lot of information.
I'm going to have to get a copy myself. just to see the ones around here, that'd be good.
Yes, yeah. Thanks for inviting me onto your show.
No problem. Thank you for joining me anyway. It's been a blast. And yeah, we'll have to, if you have another experience, come on and tell us about it. That'd be really good.
I definitely will.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
No problem. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for everyone in the chat room for joining us tonight. It's been as good as ever. So yeah, if you'll just catch me next week on next week's show. So thank you everybody, and thank you Colin. Goodbye everybody.
Bye everybody.